So, Blaine, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm very excited to have you here today. And we're going to talk about the GameCo and your newly launched brand, iGameCo, right? And as a company, GameCo has been at the forefront of introducing skill-based gaming to the casino space, and you're the person even behind the idea to introducing or bringing video games to land-based casino space. But it's something that many in the industry are still skeptical of. So can you explain us why it's so critical to actually, bring on skill-based games in order to engage all important millennials?
Absolutely. Thank you for putting together this interview. I'm really glad to contribute, and I appreciate that introduction very much. As you mentioned, GameCo and I were the first company to put out skill-based games in land-based casinos. We launched our video game gambling machines in the fall of 2016. So we've been operating games in land-based casinos across North America for about 4 years now, and our focus is on combining video games and slot machines. And admittedly, it's taken a lot of learning and iteration. We're currently on the 5th generation of our platform and gaming technology. And I do think we've figured out the magic formula, if you will, of how to make skill-based games work in land-based casinos. And to your point or question about why it's so important, slot machines generate about 80% of revenue in most casinos, gaming revenue, that is. But what we've seen from actual data operating our machines in multiple jurisdictions over more than 3 years is that 81% of spending on our games comes from 21 to 49-year-old players, but only 21% of spending from that demographic is contributed to slot machines. So we are seeing 4 times the spending compared to slot machines from Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z players. And that is so important because they are currently the largest customer base, and they're clearly the future customer base as well. The other thing that we've seen from looking at our data is that the peak of average slot players' age is actually a little bit older than most of the industry typically describes. We actually see the peak age of spending on slot machines at 70 years old. And that's just not a sustainable part of our business as we look 10, 20, 30 years out. I do not think slot machines are going to go away, but there clearly is a need for other types of gaming experiences to engage new, different, and younger customers. I think casino operators do a great job running their businesses, but they're also very insulated from the rest of the other industries that have been gaining over the last few decades. So if you look at land-based casinos, we've seen roughly 1% year-over-year growth. I think in North America, land-based gaming is about a $65 billion industry. But if you look at video games, we're seeing 20% year-over-year growth in video games, and it's roughly a $156 billion industry. So it's a much larger opportunity to tap into. The average gamer in the US is in their early 30s, in fact, around 33 years old. It's a perfect demographic for casinos to engage with. And again, it's not a matter of either or slots or video game gambling. It's really a matter of both. We're going to need both of these products, as well as table games and electronic table games and newly imagined casino floors and overall marketing experiences to engage with the next generations of customers. They truly are different than previous generations. We've grown up with video games and smartphones and social media, and it's definitely changed our expectations around interactivity, agency, communication. And I think it's extremely important for casinos to engage with that now now more than ever, because of what we've just experienced with the shutdown over the last 6 months, if anything, that's just accelerated trends that were already underlying the industry. And we're really experiencing that in our land-based business. We're seeing greater demand for our games now than ever. And even from some casinos that wouldn't have typically been customers of ours in the past, because they know that there's a need to engage with this younger audience.
Exactly, no doubt. Actually, we're seeing that the COVID-19 crisis altered the trajectory of the gambling in the United States, right? Yeah, so we are seeing the things are moving away from the land-based casinos and the traditional sports betting towards the online and mobile casino. But can you actually tell us from your experience with the GameCo the profile? I mean, we already said that it's a younger demographic, and it's millennials and the Generation Z. But can you describe the profile and the needs of, let's say, GameCo player in comparison with the traditional, the 70 years of gambler?
We generally refer to them as casino gamers. And I think one thing that's very important is that this demographic definitely wants to wager. So there's no lack of demand for an interest around gambling and wagering. I would say the psychographics or characteristics of this audience is they're very social. They grew up playing video games. Probably 3/4 are what we would consider gamers, whether that's casual games on their mobile phone or core games on a console or PC. They're definitely gamers. They want to get together with their friends. They want to have social experiences, so it is much less solitary. One thing that I always raise and shout out because it was news today, they want to be in non-smoking environments. And I noticed today that Park MGM in Las Vegas announced they'll be the first strip property that's 100% non-smoking. Wow. From our earliest surveys, we always saw that our customers were very interested in a more, health conscious environment generally. And the key thing when it comes to the type of games that they want to play is they want interactivity and agency. So at GameCo, we always think about the Venn diagram, the overlap between video games and gambling. And again, slot machines are amazing. They've evolved over 100 years. They are incredible pieces of technology and entertainment. And the key pieces there are the thrill and anticipation of both winning and losing. And it's taken us a while to integrate that with the video game experience, which is often more fast-paced and more focused on fun and interactivity, elements of competition, leaderboards, and some typical video game experiences, particularly around things like skill and strategy. And it definitely has been a challenge to find the right mix. And at GameCo, we call our latest generation of technology Gamer's Edge. And it's really our solution to everything that we've learned over the last 4 years. And I would summarize Gamer's Edge by solving 3 of the key challenges we've learned, which is first, a player should be rewarded for their skill and strategy with bigger payouts. But the average player should still have an experience similar to slot machines. Mm-hmm. And finally, the casino needs to know that they have a guaranteed hold percentage. And we've solved that with our Gamer's Edge technology. And what's really amazing about it is it works under existing regulations for both land-based slot machines and iGaming. So we have now been incorporating this technology into almost all of our games for both retail and digital casinos. And what we have seen since implementing this is greater player engagement, which means more time on device, which ultimately means more win per unit for the casino. And what we're seeing at casinos that are actually indexing our games against similar non-slot games is that our games are indexing at about 2 times the average of games that don't include the Gamer's Edge technology. So not only is it solving the experience for the player, it's solving the critical issue for the casino of how do you attract and monetize this new, different, and younger audience.
Wow, I mean that's really, really, really cool. And talking about the esports wagering, and the requirements, and the insights you already achieved with this technology. The GameCo recently launched also the new brand, right? iGameCo. And to focus on the skill-based iGaming, free play gambling, and esports betting. So can you tell us what's your plans with this new venture?
Sure. Well, when I came up with the name for GameCo, I never really thought about the digital side. We've definitely explored it, but we kind of lucked out with the iGameCo brand name. It's a part of GameCo, and it leverages all of our team and knowledge and experience and intellectual property and games that we've developed. And for the last 2 years, we've really been looking at how do we enter the digital space? What's our offering? How are we providing something of value to the industry? And what we were seeing as we researched and spoke to people was a very similar challenge to the land-based industry, which was an oversupply of slot games in iGaming, which were all monetizing and therefore cannibalizing much of the same customer base, and a real demand for different new gaming experiences. And what we realized is that everything we had developed in land-based would translate very easily to iGaming, and that our experience and relationship in esports, along with our licensing structure in the US, put us in an amazing position to bring esports betting to the US as well. And as we know, no company has really unlocked the potential for esports betting in the US. And at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to three things. First, the licensing structures in the US are definitely different and a little bit more challenging than Europe and other jurisdictions. So many people don't want to enter the US, but we're already licensed in 27 jurisdictions across North America. The second part of it really comes down to the data. So we've partnered with a company called Grid in Germany, and they have put together the best data offering in the world for esports betting. And that's because it is based on official server data. They're providing us with data directly from the game servers with near 100% accuracy in real time. And the reason that's very important in the US is that in-play wagering makes up about 60 to 80% of handle in other jurisdictions. But in the US, the only way regulators are going to allow in-play wagering is if you're using what they call sanctioned data, official data directly from the servers. As the official exclusive partner for Grid in North America, we're poised to be able to deliver that in our offering. And then strangely, the last piece of it, the third piece, as I mentioned earlier, is the fact that because sports betting and iGaming is rolling out state by state, the traditional casinos and sports books, and even the newer ones like DraftKings or FanDuel, they are so busy with each new state opening and delivering their traditional sports betting, they just don't have any time to work on esports betting. They don't have the expertise, and it's not their core focus. So combining the fact that we're already licensed, we have this amazing relationship with Grid on the data, and the fact that there's this vacuum in the US, it's just created an amazing opportunity for us to be able to enter these jurisdictions. We'll likely launch first in Colorado and follow quickly with some other jurisdictions, including Michigan, New Jersey, Virginia, and other states in the US where esports betting has already been regulated.
Exactly. I mean, you find yourself in the perfect position, and And I believe that, the operators, sports betting and the casino operators who are sleeping on the esports betting, they should definitely get in touch with you, right?
Thank you. I agree. As I always say, when people ask, what should people do to get into esports betting in the US, I say, call GameCo.
Exactly. Actually, we should go, down making subtitles your number directly, so they don't lose
Thank
the
you.
time. But to talk about the technology, and you're a true visionary. I mean, that's just a fact. So what do you think? What's the most promising new technology out there when it comes to iGaming? And will VR ever catch on? Or
I think that technologies like VR and AR are still a little ways out. I think that mobile is really the biggest opportunity right now. And we're focusing, we call iGameCo mobile first video game gambling. And there's some real considerations around that. And I would say the keys are user experience and user interface on a mobile phone. It's just much smaller. How do you build games that are great for tapping versus using a mouse and keyboard? And then the other big part of it is the delivery size of it. So when we're making our land-based games, we use a technology called Unity. Our games are hundreds of megabytes, if not gigabytes. When we're making our mobile games, we're typically shooting for the game to be under 10 megabytes. And I was actually joking yesterday with one of our lead engineers on iGaming. I started making websites in the early 1990s and CD-ROMs as well. And it's amazing that so much of what we were focused on then in reducing file size for low bandwidth is exactly the things that we're focusing on now in terms of delivering great experiences for iGaming. I mean, while we in the US and much of Europe, we generally have, 4G, now 5G, or you're on Wi-Fi, when you think about the larger audience here, you want to deliver a really streamlined, low impact download for the game. And you want to give them the ability to trial things very quickly. And if they're waiting, an extra 10 or 15 seconds even to load up the game, they might just give up and move on. And these are customers that are very expensive to acquire. And so when you mention other technologies, when I think about other areas that GameCo wants to add value, it's definitely in the affiliate and user acquisition space, which is why we've developed the concept and category of free play gambling. Because what it's going to let us do is acquire customers without them having to be regulated and go through KYC and AML, expose them to games, and if they like those games, we can then point them to regulated casinos in their jurisdictions where now they can sign up. And of course, as we've seen with deals like the Barstool Penn acquisition, the cost of user acquisition for the sports books and casinos has really become one of the most critical factors towards success.
Exactly. And maybe, I mean, as you mentioned, that's, I would say, is like, the one of the characteristics as well of the Generation Z or the millennials, because they do not want to wait. It's
Yeah.
it's the generation of the people who are easily bored and want to be in a control of the things. So that's going to be definitely one of the things for the future that the operators and the providers will have to manage and to focus on. But to talking in general, I know you're focused on the United States market, but from your experience or what you can see, like what are now like the hot spots when it comes to the esports phenomenon?
So I would definitely say from an esports perspective, it's a global industry. Asia has always been the real home of esports. I would say in Europe, Germany, and now London are really expanding. But probably the areas that people aren't looking at are LATAM and South America. Particularly Brazil is a huge esports country and a real untapped market there for esports betting and skill-based gaming in general. So we definitely are focused on North America. We are a small company, but we will be announcing some partnerships over the next few months that allow us to work with local partners in some of these international jurisdictions for us to be able to provide the solutions that we've developed and the expertise that we have to tap into this market. Again, very much looking at LATAM and South America. For us, it's an advantage being based in Las Vegas that we have much of the same time zone access as well. But it's really an area that nobody's looking at, or at least not looking at as aggressively as the US right now. But it's going to be one of the huge growth areas over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I have to agree. But talking about the future, where do you see the things with the GameCo, in 5 years from now? And even like, what's your hope for the esports in the next 5, 10 years?
Well, it's funny. I have a friend, he's now the CEO of one of the largest esports tournament operators, and we've known each other for almost a decade. And I think every year when I see him at their next event and it's bigger than last year, I say, I can't believe how big it's gotten. We finally made it as an industry. And his answer to me has always been, well, we're still growing and it's still a couple years away. So I think the interest around esports is great, but we also have to recognize it's still a pretty small industry. So if you look at the worldwide revenue for esports, it was projected at 1.1 billion for 2020. Looks like it'll come in at about 1.5 billion. But only about 175 to 200 million of that is consumer spending. The vast majority of esports spending is corporate spending on sponsorships, publishing rights, and media deals. If you look at esports betting, there's $17 billion in handle. That is all consumer spending, and it's 75 times the consumer spending in the rest of the entire esports industry. So I think for traditional esports, which is an area I still try to be involved in, we really need to focus on consumer spending. We need to figure out what consumers want to spend their money on so we can grow the traditional industry. And then I think in terms of esports betting, it's really critical to roll it out in regulated markets and provide really great data so that betting operators like iGameCo or any of our partners or any of the other great companies that are out there like Rivalry or Luckbox that are doing esports betting as well, we need to really focus on delivering the best user experience, the best betting lines. And a big thing that we need to do, and it's something I'm working on as an executive producer in entertainment, which is really where I started my career, is educating non-endemic esports fans about the industry and wagering. We need to extend this market to more people that would be interested in it if they only were educated a little bit more. Some of these games can be very, as what I call, impenetrable. I love games like CSGO or Dota 2 or League of Legends, but when I bring newcomers to events and I show them these games, they're very hard to follow. Whereas if you bring someone to European football or North American football, you might not understand all the rules, but it's pretty easy to follow. Get the ball in the goal, get the ball over the end zone. It's pretty easy to figure out. And the more we can do to educate a wider audience around esports and then wagering, the bigger the market's going to be. That's really the opportunity. It's not getting more money from people that are already wagering. It's expanding the audience.
Exactly. And I see as well, for example, the sim racing to be great, like, the transitional kind of like the phenomenon, which is like closer to the traditional, even the people who are not esports oriented, as you said, they are not, the real like esports players, they can understand and maybe transition to, to the esport phenomenon, right?
I agree. I think games that translate experiences that people are familiar with, like racing or sports, are a huge opportunity. And if I was still in the video game industry, and anyone who's listening, think about this, making a new sports game specifically for betting is a huge untapped opportunity, because some game publishers are still on the fence of how to approach the sports betting industry, even though it's now widely regulated and all of the traditional sports leagues are involved. If you were to develop a brand new sports game specifically for esports betting, it would be a huge opportunity for a game publisher. And I think in 2021 and beyond, we're going to start to see that happening. We're going to see game developers and publishers realize that there's an untapped market for delivering these kinds of experiences to players and bettors.
Exactly. Not everyone can be 15 years old, the boy playing in their room, the Fortnite or whatever, So
That's
that's
true. And that's why I always love to say, the average gamer is in their early 30s. The average esports bettor is in their mid 20s. So this is a, adult legal audience, and they're really being underserved by all of the traditional offerings from casinos and sports books.
exactly. Well, Blaine, thank you so much. I think that's the wrap, and you gave us absolutely, great insights into the world of the video gaming slash gambling slash, the skill-based game. And it's all overlapping, and definitely gonna see a lot of developments in the esports world, and all it's gonna become one industry. We're all hoping for it, that there's not gonna be those, the edges between those industries. And I'm wishing you a lot of luck with the iGameCo and GameCo, and I'm sure that we're gonna speak here in 5 years about another new concept you brought up.
Thank you so much, Simona. I really appreciate the consideration and love contributing to your story here, and look forward to when we can all see each other again in Malta.
Exactly. And definitely there's gonna be, hopefully in the future, more esports and video game oriented events in Malta as well, so we can
I'm
discuss
sure
this.
there will be.
There
We'll
will be
make it
fun.
happen.
Exactly. Thank you, Blaine, so much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Simona. Have a great evening. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.